Mr. Edwin Moyo is the chairman of Nhimbe Fresh Exports in Mwonzora, and I'm glad to have him on the program. It is the Rebound series. Let's begin, Mr. Moyo, by finding out just a brief overview of your operations here. What do you do?
Thank you very much. Nhimbe Fresh Exports is a company that is into horticulture. We export fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, blueberries and strawberries into the European supermarket chains. Currently, we've got several markets that we service, and we have a new market that is opened up in the United Arab Emirates. It is the reason why we have been in this business since 1996. We've been exporting into this market since 1996. We have maintained these markets despite the land reform program, despite the fears that we would lose land. But we still have confidence from those markets because we have managed to deliver a quality product throughout there. So you can imagine being in those very aggressive markets from 1996 to date. It's not easy.
What sort of impact did, you did mention the land reform, the uncertainty and those risks. What sort of impact did that have on operations?
Well, it did have an impact on the operations in this sense that, everything else that we grow is not grown on the farms. Some of it is grown from outgrowers. So a lot of our outgrowers lost land. We also lost some of the land in Odzi, as you might be aware, in Kondozi. And all that brought our volumes down. So we were not able to compete with the same volumes that we were competing with. But because we had niche markets, we had to continue to supply what we did. And out of a very difficult situation, maintain those markets. We gave the markets confidence that very soon we'll be getting back, which is what we're doing now. There were fears around the fact that, land had been taken by the government, and so land has got no title, so you can't buy from people who have got no title. But the government quickly reversed that by offering or giving offer letters. Those offer letters are now accepted as title because the offer letter is permission from the government for you to farm on the land. So the government owns the land, and you are leasing the land. So those now are acceptable by the markets, which is a good thing.
This type of products that you're growing are specialized, require a lot of tender loving care. Is this something that rural farmer can actually do?
Yeah, so what we've discovered is that for crops such as the manchester and sugar snaps that we're growing right now, the ones that we are currently exporting, for small-scale farmers, it's easy for them. They learn, they can do it very quickly. And they can do a better job than would normally do because they've got all their heart on it. That is why in 2006, we started the project in Kasho Valley, where we're concentrating on 0.1 to 5 hectares per farmer. It was a very successful project, the most successful export project that we ever ran. And we're going to pursue that as well. And we find that these farmers can do a better job. But on more complicated crops such as strawberries, blueberries, they tend not to be very good at them because they're specialized. The blueberries that we grow ourselves are not the kind of varieties that are found in Zimbabwe for every farmer. All the other varieties that are being grown in Zimbabwe are not ours. We grow a special variety that is very different from what is being grown in Zimbabwe. It's an exclusive variety, and Zimbabwe has only been given 200 hectares to grow. Zambia has also been given 200. So in Zimbabwe, it's grown by Zambezi berries, and in Zambia, it's grown by Zambezi berries, and in Zimbabwe, by Nhimbe. So those are more complicated and sophisticated crops. They have plant breeders' rights. They are monitored very strictly by the breeders, and they will tell you when you should grow them, when you should take them out. Very complicated and very complex. So those we can't give to our small-scale farmers.
What does it mean for some of these rural and small-scale farmers to be part of a scheme such as yours?
So the biggest problem that we've got in Zimbabwe is that people are growing crops which they cannot sell. In some cases, most people grow crops once a year. They grow maize, and that's it. So if you can imagine a small-scale farmer growing maize for his own consumption, he can't sell. So these people are not monetized. What our project does is it monetizes those people. They are growing 4 or 5 crops a year, which we can find a market for them. In our experience in Kasho Valley, we found out that a farmer that was growing on 0.5 hectares was earning somewhere around about 150 to 170 US dollars per month. And what that did then was it monetized the people. The banks went in. medical services went in, schools went in, shops went in. Because suddenly these people have income to spend. And so that then brings economic development in those areas with economic activity taking place. So this is what we want to do. We can't leave these things to government alone. We as a private sector must be able to develop our own people. So we want to make sure that all those small-scale farmers have got markets. Whatever they grow, they can sell. Because once they've sold, it's cash in their pockets. And they can use that cash for other things. There are various other products that we want to come up with. And we're doing a bit of crowdfunding, which is going to augment this whole process that we're doing.
Is the environment right, or is it conducive for the private sector to come on board and play this role that you mentioned?
The environment is what it is. So the market is what it is. So the environment actually encourages us to do business. But okay, you can never find a perfect environment where everything's done. But it's up to the private sector to look outside the box and do what they have to do. We are looking at these things from outside the box. The money that we have raised has not been, we've not gone out there, we've not gone to a process of inviting other people. We've just done crowdfunding. We've got investors from the United States, we've got investors from UK, we've got investors from Europe, we've got investors from Australia. All crowdfunding that has been put in this solar project. They believe in us, they believe in our markets, and all these investors have put in money. So if, imagine we had gone there and said, look, we're looking for money to invest in a farming project in Zimbabwe. And you would, so certainly the people would have said, no, we can't. But the crowdfunders understand we have a structure under which we raise funding. We raised so far $10 million US, which is coming onto the farms. Some of it coming to develop our blueberry project. We are actually in the market for another 15 million, which is coming through our crowdfunding. And then we have got local investors such as Old Mutual that believe in us and have put in money.
So the mantra is Zimbabwe is open for business. Do you believe that the markets out there, investors out there are buying into it?
I think that the onus is on us to show the outside world that we are open for business. I was attending a conference in some country, and someone was talking about, how the whole world is going to change, the opportunities that are in the whole world. They talked about every continent except Africa. And when I followed him, I said, listen, you've ignored a very important continent here, which is Africa, in terms of what you're saying. And he said to me, you know what, if you don't take yourself seriously, no one will. So as Zimbabweans, we have to take ourselves seriously. Because if we don't take ourselves seriously, no one is ever going to look at us.
It had been said that, Zimbabwe had lost these markets. You mentioned those uncertainties and anxieties around land reform. Do you think that perception is changing, that we can claw back some of those lost markets?
Well, you probably know that a lot of those markets that have been taken by those people have not been maintained. Some of them have got issues, I will not name them, with chemical regimes. Zimbabwe is a country that has been very loyal and is known for doing things properly. And I think those that have left Zimbabwe and gone to farm elsewhere still miss Zimbabwe. And the outside world look at Zimbabwe as one place where business can be done properly, where we can grow crops, where they look for the farming is one that can be the best farming. And they look forward to getting products from Zimbabwe. It does not matter whether Kenya supplies, but there is still a gap for Zimbabwe. What we're doing now is opening up new opportunities. Remember, the consumer of yesterday is very different from the consumer of tomorrow. We're looking forward now to the guys that are now looking at consuming our products are more health conscious and now looking at themselves in terms of what they eat, what they take, and what they take out. And these are the people that have got the most money. So we have to be looking at new markets. Don't remain the same; they change. The demographics of the markets change. Yesterday it was the English housewife consuming lots of runner beans. Today the English housewife is normal there. Now we've got the size zeros that are eating Munch 2 and sugar snaps. They worry about their weight and so forth. And they have got a lot of money to spend. So markets change. So it's fine, you can take a market, but as long as you don't renew yourself in that market, you will still find yourself irrelevant.
The business you're in obviously requires quick turnaround, and so logistics become critical. How important is that aspect of the business?
The fact that there are not many airlines flying into Zimbabwe, but we've made a plan. So we put the product on a few airlines that are still coming into Zimbabwe. But also we have got trucks that run in between Harare and Johannesburg and consolidate our product with other product that goes then into the European market. The ideal situation would be, which is where we're trying to do, what we're trying to do now, create the volumes so that we can have a command over our freight. So we can go to British Airways, for instance, and say, we're doing 5,000 tons or 500,000 tons, and we can give you 5 tons every week or 10 tons every week, guaranteed. But we want a discount. That is where we're going to be. That's number two. We also need to make sure that our sea freight is properly organized, because we're a landlocked country, and it's expensive to freight these things by air into Europe. But if we organize ourselves and look at sea freight and have our own containers where we can control our own shipments, that is the best way to go.
Government has a very ambitious horticultural development plan, which also incorporates rural growers and communal farmers. We understand that there is talk of sinking over 40,000 boreholes over the next few years. Is that the right way to go about this?
I don't believe in boreholes. I believe in damming. I believe that all the dams that we've got in the area, in our country, should be talking to our production. We should have 100 kilometers radius of pipeline that is doing irrigation of some kind. So we must have our dams talking to each other, talking to the people, talking to the rural community, because water is what we need. And the rural community is where we can get most of these crops, like the ones that are demanded in the United Arab Emirates, the ones that are also demanded in Europe. Less more of the blueberries, less more of the complicated crops like the strawberries. But we believe that if we can grow those and put in handling facilities in those areas, there is the growth for our market. The good thing is that we have youngsters who were determined to go into agriculture. They have got the passion for agriculture. And these are the guys that we're working to partner with. We've partnered with some youths who we are working with at the moment, and there are some of them. These are some of them that we're going to bring in this project, the United Arab Emirates program. And we think that we'll bring in as many youths as possible, work joint ventures with them. We want to work also with women. We want to work with the rural guys that don't have quite enough, that don't have markets. The idea is to make sure that all those guys have got money to put in their pockets. They can spend their money. The banks don't have to remain in Harare. They will follow where that money is, because they want to make sure that that money is bankable. So that's our aim, to get those guys to be bankable, to get those guys to have security. When they want to borrow, they can borrow. When they want to bank, they bank their money, but not for them to get onto a bus to go and bank in Harare. The banks must follow them. The supermarkets must follow them. The telephone companies must follow them. So in that case,
they do that is
yeah,
if they have the money.
Yeah, and then the only they can do, the only way because they're following the money. The guys will have the money. They will have to follow them because they've got the money. At the moment, they can't go there because the guys have got nothing to offer. They've got no money. But once the guys have got money to bank, they've got money to spend, you will see the supermarkets moving in, you will see the banks moving in, you see all the infrastructure moving in. That does not require a government. It requires private sector.
Do you believe in value addition?
Value addition is the best. As you can see, everything else that we're doing here is value added. Gets to the market, ready to go into the pot. So it's from field to fork. There are certain things that you cannot afford to do to add value on, like the peaches. They go to specific markets that want to eat them as they are. Some people want peach juice and so forth, but the sugar levels are what is worrying the world at the moment. I was with one chief executive of a company, which I shall not name, very international company, a big company. And he was looking in a supermarket, and we were together, and he's worried about the amount of sugars that his product has got. And these are things that we've got to worry about. So the peach itself has got its own natural sugar content that is got, that's taken by. But when you add value to it, you're adding more sugar that may be dangerous or that may not be good to a consumer. So the market is aware of this, very conscious about what they take and what they're not taking, because the world has become very health conscious.
Every Zimbabwean wants their country to return to its former glory, and we believe that we have a role to play in doing that. So we'll be speaking to different Zimbabweans from different facets of life to share their views of what it will take to get Zimbabwe to rebound. The Rebound series comes to you every Friday between 5 and 6 p.m. on the Heart and Soul digital platforms. Join me, Farai Mwakutuya, for those incisive discussions. Welcome back. This is the Rebound series. The program continues today focusing on the horticulture sector and the prospects therein. My guest joining me now in our discussion is Mr. Similo Nkala. He's the Operations Director for Zimtrade, the trade promotion agency. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much.
Now, let's focus on, I suppose, the current state of the horticulture sector. Clearly a very important sector, but could you give us an indication or a picture of its status in terms of the numbers?
Okay. Thank you very much for the question. The horticulture sector has been identified as low-hanging fruit, where it will be a key driver in terms of the growth of exports in Zimbabwe. It's as highlighted in the National Development Strategy 1 and also in the National Trade Policy and also the National Export Strategy for Zimbabwe. In terms of our exports, you find that in 2019 our total exports of horticultural produce was about 112 million US dollars. This is according to TradeMap, which is an ITC based online tool. So in terms of the key drivers of that sector, you'll find that at the present moment, the world over, there is an issue of healthy living, healthy lifestyles. So the superfoods are more like one of the drivers of our exports of horticulture. And here we're talking about produce like your avocado, where our total exports was about 14 million US dollars. But if you look at the world trade of the avocado market, it's about 7 billion. So you find that there is a lot that we still need to do as a country to tap into that market. There is also the blueberries, which is said to be the poster boy of the superfoods. So in terms of the world market of blueberries, it's about 3.9 billion. But as a country in 2019, our total exports was about 6 million. So the potential is there. So there's a lot that we still need to do to expand in terms of our exports of those produce. There is also the issue of manch 2 peas, whereby the world market it's about 430 million or so. So as a country, we need to tap into that market. And when it comes to horticulture, one of the key issues when we are engaging potential buyers in export markets, there is an issue of knowing the window period. When can you take advantage of a certain time when you can supply a certain market? So you find that like for manch 2 peas, as a country we are able to supply manch 2 peas to Europe between April and August every year. So there is a need for us to look at other window periods for other produce so that we are able to take advantage of those window periods.
You mentioned obviously the current performance at 112 million. What are sort of the targets that we're looking at in terms of where do we want this to be and by when?
In terms of the targets, I'll talk about the recently launched Horticulture Recovery and Growth Plan, which talks about moving the contribution or the total agricultural sector as a whole from 5.2 billion industry to an 8 billion industry. So that's the target that is there. That for now it's a 5.2 billion, but we have to move that industry to an $8 billion industry. Yes.
How do we do that?
In terms of how do we do that, I've already mentioned that there are already certain sectors within the horticulture sector that have been identified to be the key drivers in terms of exports. I've mentioned avocados, I've mentioned blueberries. There are also other crops like your macadamia nuts, where we are moving or we are increasing our exports as a country. There are also other nuts that are coming through, like in Matibeleland, I know through ADA, I think there are some projects that they are having in terms of pecan nuts. So you find that those are some of the programs that are available that will drive our exports of horticulture produce. There is also the issue of cut flowers. you find that we used to be one of the major players in terms of exports of horticulture, of cut flowers to the European market. So there are new players that are coming in, and those new players, and also the assistance that we are giving as Zimtrade through our technical intervention programs. We've got MOUs with POM of Netherlands and SES of Germany, whereby they are coming in to provide the technical expertise in terms of how our farmers, whether it's the smallholder farmer or the large farmers, how they can increase their yield per hectare, which is very critical for you to be competitive, and also how can they improve in terms of the quality of their product. Because when it comes to export markets, you are not, when you are exporting to that particular country, you are not only competing with the locals in that country, you are also competing with other countries that also want that same market. So when we are bringing in through the technical intervention programs that Zimtrade has, this will assist our farmers to be able to compete not only on price but also on quality.
Where does access to finance fit in all this? Because as you quite clearly say, the technical capacity building is what you're doing.
Yes.
How much of an issue is finance for these farmers to be able to take that step up or ramp up production?
Definitely, finance is a very major issue in terms of our drive, or in terms of increasing our exports of horticulture produce. So you'll find that I think the discussion that we've been having, or the proposals that we've been that we recently shared through for the midterm budget review, is that there is a need for us to relook in terms of our finance models, especially for fruits production. You find that for citrus, it's for them to start harvesting for export, it's the 4th or the 5th year. That is when they start harvesting. If I'm not mistaken, I think for blueberries, they start harvesting on the 2nd year. So there is a need to come up with finance models that are tailor-made for those specific sectors. As I mentioned, avocados, when we're talking about a $7 billion business and we're only exporting about 14 billion, the possibilities there's a lot of potential for us that we can tap into. Yes.
Do you find that now small-scale farmers, communal farmers are buying in, are coming on board and realizing that, you know what, let's not just grow what we've traditionally grown, which is maize in most instances, but let's now go into some of these more specialized crops?
Yes. The small-scale farmers are coming in, and also as Zimtrade, we've got a certain program which is called the Best Model Farm, where we are identifying those farmers that are already exporting, and we're trying to link them with this smallholder farmer to say, for a start, maybe they can contract some of the smallholder farmers to be outgrowers. Because when it comes to exports, you also need the experience. So if these farms, I think there are 4 of them, if these farms are able to bring in the smallholder farmer, and they're able maybe for a start to export through them, then after 2 or so years, they've gained the experience in terms of the requirements of the market, then thereafter they can be able to export on their own.
Are we getting fair prices when we export to these markets?
In terms of getting fair price, as I mentioned, the issue of the window periods, you definitely need to know the window period, because the window period is the one that determines whether the market is flooded or not. So if it so happens that you are producing a certain product when the market is flooded, definitely you will find that you won't get a lower price. At one time, I think I was talking to the farmers that are into Manch 2 production. I think they were talking about yes, we would have said our window period for Europe is it's April to sometime in August. But they were saying there is a time, I think, between week 26 and week 36 where there is flooding of the product from also other markets. So the key thing about export markets is that you need to know your supply window periods, and also you also need to make sure that you sign a contract well before you start planting. That's what you always encourage our farmers as Zimtrade. We always say that you start from the market. You start from the market, you engage your potential buyers, then thereafter you should be able to now go back to base and be able to produce for that particular buyer that would have contacted you. Well, would you have even agreed on the price? Yes, there will be some fluctuations. I'm sure there will be some. It will be an agreement between the two of you, but you will be having an assured price.
When you say start with the market, engage the market, how does one go about finding these markets? Do I just go on Google and say who's looking for Munch 2 or who's looking for blueberries, and what role do you play in terms of making sure or helping to get some of those markets?
That is where we come in as ZimTrade, as the National Trade Development Promotion Organization. We've got a number of programs that we have to assist our farmers to be able to find these markets. We participate in export promotion events. We have participated before in fruit logistica in Germany. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate this year we couldn't make it because of COVID. The event was cancelled. But we also have been we've recently organized another trip to Dubai, where we believe that it's a market that we need to tap into as a country. So what we do is for those farmers that will be interested in export markets, they need to come to us, they discuss with us, and we don't just take anyone to these export promotion events. We come through to your farm, we do an assessment, an export readiness assessment, because when export markets are very unforgiving. You have to do it right first time and all the time. Mm-hmm. So what happens is that as ZimTrade, we do an export readiness assessment to find out whether you are ready for exports. If you are not ready, then we've got certain capacity building programs that we have, where we'll take you through those capacity building programs. And also, as I mentioned earlier on about technical intervention programs, so we also advise you to maybe apply for an expert from POM of Netherlands, who will then assist you on how you can improve on the quality of your product or how you can become export ready. So that is how we do it as ZimTrade. We also provide market information, the relevant market information at times, because when it comes to export markets, I know at times people will be knowing that a certain product is in demand in a certain market. Mm-hmm. Then they start planting that product. Then they come to ZimTrade maybe just towards harvesting time.
So I've got tons of this.
I've got tons of sweet potatoes. But is it the right variety? Mm-hmm. For a start, because that's the most important thing. Is it the right variety? There's also the issue of size. For some markets, you find that size also matters. Yep. You find, like, say, the Chinese market, we know that in terms of a family, most of them is a family of 3, a family of 4. So imagine your butternut is very big, or your watermelon is a very big one, and can they consume it? Some projects, it's better you consume them once than for you to cut it and put it in the fridge. Mm-hmm. So there is a need. We come in there as ZimTrade in terms of advising and giving as much information as possible.
Indeed.
Yes.
We need to take a short break. I want to come back and revisit some of the issues you mentioned here. Export readiness, for instance, just to find out, because, clearly we need to generate that export revenue, but, how ready are we? And also some of the, strategic advantages or competitive advantages that Zimbabwe has, particularly when we focus on horticulture. Okay, so stay tuned, viewers. It is the Rebound series where we continue this discussion on horticulture, as has been mentioned by Mr. Similo Nkala, Operations Director of ZimTrade. One of the low-hanging fruits that this country is targeting to grow export revenue, to increase export revenue. The Rebound series will continue to discuss that and a whole lot more. Stay tuned. Every Zimbabwean wants their country to return to its former glory, and we believe that we have a role to play in doing that. So we'll be speaking to different Zimbabweans from different facets of life to share their views of what it will take to get Zimbabwe to rebound. The Rebound series comes to you every Friday between 5 and 6 p.m. on the Heart and Soul digital platforms. Join me, Farai Mwakutuya, for those incisive discussions. Welcome back. We call this effort the Rebound series. My guest is Similo Nkala, Operations Director for ZimTrade. Before we went to the break, you're obviously talking about a phenomenon which I'm sure occurs quite a bit, where people hear that, avocados are in big demand in China and everyone starts growing avocados. But as you quite rightly say, there's need for market intelligence and market awareness. The assessment you also mentioned, where you go onto a farm, you determine export readiness. In general, in Zimbabwe, how prepared for exports would you say we are, particularly from a horticulture point of view? We'll look at other sectors later, but when we say export readiness, how ready are we? And what are we talking about?
In terms of export readiness, we are ready as a country, and we have been exporting to even developed countries like your EU market. And if we are looking at the export of horticultural produce, you find that the bulk of our horticultural produce are going to the EU market, specifically Netherlands, UK, Germany. So you find that if we are already exporting to to those markets, we can safely say that we are ready. But as you mentioned, there are small-scale water farmers that will need assistance. And the good thing about horticulture is that there is already a standard. In terms of if you want to export to the European market, there is a global gap standard which you need to be certified under. So if you are certified under the global gap standard, it becomes easy for you to penetrate the EU market. So when we're talking about export readiness, we're looking at issues to do with quality is one of them. I think we've spoken about it. Are you able to produce a quality product? And also the issue of capacity. Export markets, when a buyer when you engage a buyer, you wouldn't want to buy 1 ton from this one 1 ton from the other one. You want someone who supply him with large volumes, so that it doesn't need to deal with the number of buyers. So the issue of capacity also comes in there to say, do you have the capacity to supply export markets? There are also other issues like management commitment towards exports, because at times we get inquiries maybe from the exports sales manager, and they say that we are looking at going into export markets. So when we go to a factory or when we go to a farm, we now start to get further information in terms of management commitment towards exports. We have been talking about the issue of the global gap certification. There's funding that you will need for you to be certified. There are some payments that you need to do. So if management is not committed towards exports, they will not be able to pay for that certification. If we are traveling to trade fairs, if management is not willing to fit maybe the bill for the air flight or for accommodation during your stay for trade fairs, those are some of the things that we'll be looking at. There are also other things like the knowledge, organizational knowledge. How knowledgeable are you in terms of what you are producing? If it's to do with horticulture, do you know the varieties? Do you know the seasons where you grow those peas? So those are some of the things that we will be looking at when we're talking about export readiness. There's also the issue of funding. Is the funding there? Because if it so happens that the funding is not there for now, that means you might not be ready for exports. You might need to look at the other things. So we've got a marketing and branding for international competitiveness training program, where we take you through a training that will assist you to improve on your export readiness. During that marketing and branding for international competitiveness, we also bring in banks to also present on the funding facilities that they have that are available. So those are some of the things that we do. There are also issues to do with export credit insurance. Do you have knowledge about that? And through that training program, we invite those people. There are issues to do with the registration under trade agreements. If you are registered under trade agreements, your goods get preferential treatment when they are being exported. Like for example, if you are producing biscuits, or you are producing sweet potatoes from plum tree, in Matabeleland. If it so happens that you are targeting Francistown as a market, if you are registered under a trade agreement, that means those goods are getting in duty-free into Botswana, meaning that if you are a few kilometers from that market, you're actually more like you're selling in the local market because the goods are getting in duty-free. What you only need to pay is maybe your VAT and other taxes that you're also already paying from this end. So those are some of the things that we take those farmers or those companies, the SMEs that are not export ready, we take them through that marketing and branding for international competitiveness. So we've got a winter school that is coming through in the next coming weeks. So for those that feel that they might want to be part of this program, they should contact us as Zimtrade so that they can register for this program.
Indeed.
Yeah.
You just mentioned, gap requirements, so much requirements that are required in terms of going into export markets. Some of them very mandatory, I would imagine, because of the requirements and the very specific nature of the products that are being exported. But one of the things that has been highlighted by companies here, that export is also very cumbersome export procedures locally. Okay. So a lot of documents, multiple documents that you must have, that you must pay for in order for you to export.
Yeah.
That obviously has a bearing in terms of how much we export or the cost of our exports.
Yes.
Do you concur with that?
That's the feedback that we've been getting from the farmers and also from the SMEs or from the large exporters in terms of the cumbersome process when it comes to exporting. Hence, I think sometime in 2015 or 2016, through the Office of the President and Cabinet, there was an RRI program that that started, where there was an identification of the cumbersome processes, whereby we would there was a committee that was formed on the ease of doing export business. So certain organizations, after consultations from industry players, will call in the regulatory authority to say, from the discussions that we've had with the exporters from your sector, they are saying that either the export documentation is expensive or there is a lot of export documentation. Can you give us a brief, why is it necessary to have this export documentation? So through those discussions, you find that there was some movement. There were 22 SIs that were identified during that time. I think to date about 12 of them have been amended to take into account the ease of doing export business. I'll just give you an example. I think under the Ministry of Industry and Commerce, they were quite a number of products that required export permits. I think through that engagement, a number of them were removed. Actually, the majority of them were removed. I think there were only about 4 or so products that were left for you to, if you want to export them, you require an export permit. And these products, they included things like fertilizer, which are more like, you definitely as a country, we need to safeguard in terms
strategic,
exactly, that are more strategic. So there has been a movement, but still, a lot still needs to be done.
What is the hold-up?
In terms of the hold-up, as I mentioned, for you to change an SI, it's a process, a statutory instrument. It's a process. So as I said, in terms of, I think in the first 2 years, first 2 or 3 years, that's when we managed to change 12 SIs out of 22. For us, it's a big step towards the right direction. So a lot has also been happening. A lot of engagements have been happening along the way in terms of improving on the ease of doing export business. And you find that I think there is a program that is there where there are meetings that are happening in terms of ease of doing, how we can improve on our ranking on the ease of doing our business. So you find that, yes, it's not about improving on the ranking, but ultimately the beneficiaries of that improvement in terms of the ranking are the companies.
Perhaps we get an appreciation, as you say, it's very difficult to get an SI changed. Is it not just the swoop of a pen, because it's amending the SI? Who are the stakeholders who need to make sure that it's changed, if it's clearly very important and an imperative that we change some of these things?
I think a lot has been happening. A number of stakeholders are involved, and with what is happening at the present moment, I think the will to change those SIs is there. So you'll find that I'm sure in the next coming months we'll see a lot of movements in terms of the SIs being changed.
Indeed. Well, we'll look forward to that, and hopefully that will come to pass. I just want to talk about trade expos and trade promotion trips, which you mentioned earlier that you facilitate and organize. You've just come back from the United Arab Emirates, Democratic Republic of Congo. How did those trips go?
Those trips were very good for the country in terms of our role as Zimtrade in increasing exports. As you know, we've got a target to increase exports by 10% every year. So the trips will assist in terms of our movement in reaching our target. You'll find that for the DRC market, I think the total business generated during that trip was about $10 million US. So it's a lot, and we feel that we'll get more as companies engage the buyers that they interacted with during that outward mission. Mm-hmm. Also, with regard to the UAE market, you'll find that we're in Dubai, and in Dubai, it's more like the center of the GCC or the Middle East. In 2019, they imported horticulture produce worth about 4.2 billion, of which more than 50% of it was for re-export to other countries. So as Zimtrade, we feel that if we are to increase our exports to Dubai, it will go a long way in terms of us increasing our exports of horticulture produce. So even for that particular trip, there was a lot of engagements with potential buyers, and the discussions are still going. And in terms of the total business generated, I think it was plus $3 million US for that particular week. And we are hoping that more negotiations are happening. As you know, not all companies can close deals during the course of the trade fair or the mission. So negotiations are happening between the producers and the buyers.
What informs which markets you go into? I think it's because DRC, UAE. What went behind that, and also how do you measure? You've mentioned 10 million and 3 million. How else do you measure success or return on investment?
Okay, in terms of how do we target markets, we've got a strategy as Zimtrade that is guided by the National Export Strategy as well as the National Trade Policy. So in terms of our markets, we've got certain markets in our Horizon 1 where we were focusing mostly on the regional markets, your SATIC, COMESA markets. Then in terms of Horizon 2, which is like this current period, where we feel that there is a need for us to diversify in terms of our export markets. Most of our exports, the bulk of them are going to South Africa. Like when I was talking about the whole products, I know for horticulture, I said the bulk of it is going to the EU. But if ultimately if we were to aggregate the whole exports for Zimbabwe, most of it is going to South Africa. So when we're targeting the UAE market, it's more to do with the potential in that market, as well as where we would have done a research to find out how competitive we are. Because during our research in 2018, when it comes to the UAE market, we discovered that some of the produce or the fruits and vegetables that we export to the EU, they ultimately find their way to the UAE. So what we say to Zimtrade, why not export direct? The other key thing that we do as Zimtrade is that we also consult our exporting community to say, okay, as the clothing and textile sector, what are your target markets? So you find that the clothing and textile sector will tell you that for us, maybe South Africa is we feel that we've got more potential in that market. So in terms of our export promotion events, that also guides us. We speak to the leather sector to say, where do you think we have got more potential in terms of exports? Then they will tell us to say, for this particular subsector, maybe we can go to China. For this particular subsector, we can go to Dubai. For this particular subsector, we can go to Namibia or Zambia. So that is what guides our trade promotion events. In terms of our return on investments, I think it's more to do with the business generated during the course of the trade fair. That is what we look at.
Indeed. Yeah. Another short break is now coming up. Similo, stay here. We want to come back and I think talk about, as you say, market diversification. And I think one key area, one way to do that is through the consolidated free trade area that has been signed and is now a reality in Africa. Stay tuned to the Rebound series with me, Farai Mwakutia, and my guest today, Similo Nkala, Operations Director for Zimtrade, continues shortly. Every Zimbabwean wants their country to return to its former glory, and we believe that we have a role to play in doing that. So we'll be speaking to different Zimbabweans from different facets of life to share their views of what it will take to get Zimbabwe to rebound. The Rebound series comes to you every Friday between 5 and 6 p.m. on the Heart and Soul digital platforms. Join me, Farai Mwakutuya, for those incisive discussions. Welcome back. This is the Rebound series, continuing our discussion on, the horticulture sector, which we've touched on quite extensively. Now, I really would like to delve into more issues to do with the global or the wider, broader spectrum of export promotion, particularly looking at new markets. Similo Nkala, before we went to the break, you spoke about, SIs, the RRI, the ease of doing business and things like that. From your perspective, do you think enough has been done? And I ask this because I specifically had an opportunity to speak to the Horticulture Development Council, and they gave a specific example of the China market, where they say, government is yet to finalize or to sign off the protocol with China for trade. And so because of that, countries like Zambia are exporting, sending avocados, for instance, into that market where perhaps we could be and we're missing out. So do you think enough has been done to try and expedite some of those protocols?
Yes, I think a lot is happening. As Zimtrade, we initiated some of those protocols. The one that you are speaking about, I think the citrus protocol to China, as well as the avocados, blueberries protocol to China. We've been very we've been part of the team that has been even in terms of the drafting of the protocols, and also working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Trade, as well as the Ministry of Agriculture, in terms of driving to make sure that that those protocols come into effect. But as you know, it's those countries will give certain conditions to be met in terms of how we control our pests and other things. So it's what is being done at the present moment, and in terms of maybe say the cold management system, in terms of from the time citrus is harvested, what temperatures need to be, what temperatures do they need to be put in under from the truck that transports the citrus, say from Bay Bridge to Durban, if we are using sea freight. So all those things is something that is being looked at, and how best we can work on it so that we can be able to sign those protocols.
Now, obviously, the Continental Free Trade Area has been signed off, I think came to pass on the 1st of January this year. Talked about with a lot of expectation, a lot of optimism.
Yes.
What benefits will accrue to Zimbabwe from that, in your opinion?
In terms of the African Continental Free Trade Area, it's a game changer for Africa. It's the biggest free trade agreement in the world. You find that in terms of the markets, I spoke about preferential treatment when you are registered under a certain trade agreement. So you find that our goods, there were certain markets that were not, or certain countries that were not falling under, say, SADC and COMESA, which were signatory to. So there's those additional countries that are available, which will be additional markets for our companies. So you find that the key advantage is the preferential treatment that our goods will get as we export to those countries that were not falling, say, under the COMESA or SADC. And I know there was also the tripartite free trade area. So those additional countries will actually be an additional market for some of our companies to expand to. So as you know, as our companies expand their production, it ultimately also links with the issue of employment creation. As companies increase production, more employment is created. And also you'll find that the other thing when we are talking about export markets, as more competition comes in, or as you go into export markets, you find new way of doing things. There are some lessons that are always learned as you get into those export markets. Either it's to do with the technology that is being used, that maybe you can also try to get, so that you can also be able to compete in that particular market.
How competitive were we under the previous free trade areas that you mentioned, COMESA, SADC?
In terms of our competitiveness, we have been competitive. As you know, South Africa is one of our largest trading partners, which falls under SADC. So we have been exporting to that market. We've been exporting to Zambia, we've been exporting to Malawi, Mozambique. I think the key markets where we have been facing challenges in terms of competitiveness is maybe your markets like Angola, maybe because of logistic issues. So as we're also looking at the African free trade area, we have to also find ways on how we can work around the issue of logistics. How do we take our product there? As you know, I think we are a landlocked country, but the key thing now, I think what we are selling out to the world is that we are a land-linked country. So we need to take that advantage of being land-linked in terms of how best we can take advantage of our strategic position in Africa to also expand into certain markets. You'll find that because of our position, if we can certain countries, whether it's from UAE, from the EU, if they can be able to come and invest in Zimbabwe so that they can target some of these markets, the better.
Similo, let me ask you this. There have been concerns that have been raised, and I think very valid, that this continental free trade area may just end up being a huge bonanza for some of these industrialized countries. For instance, South Africa, which is already a dominant player in SADC, very highly industrialized and already exporting. So now they have, a free access to more markets. Can we even compete, or are we not just leaving ourselves open to them? Countries like Nigeria, for instance, I know, were late to sign the agreement because of similar concerns that have been raised by their domestic manufacturers.
I think the key thing is that a number of programs are being put in place by both the regional blocs, SADC, COMESA, and also the African Continental Free Trade Area itself. There are industrialization programs that are being put in place that will assist member countries to industrialize and get the latest machinery so that they should be able to export. One key thing, if we look at the Zimbabwean economy, I think 3 or so years back, we used to have a number of products in our supermarkets, Pick and Pay, Choppers, that were imported products. But you find that the recent trend that is there, we're seeing a lot of our locally manufactured products dominating the shelves of most of these retail shops. And also you'll find that with the AfCFTA, there is also through the HStvZim bank, a number of facilities will also be availed to companies within member countries so that they can be able to tap into those funding facilities and be able, because one of the key things I think with us on the Zimbabwean economy is the issue of long-term finance. So that is what is needed by the Zimbabwean companies. So through these facilities, through the HStvZim bank, they should be able to get facilities that will assist them to get the latest machinery, and also the payment terms will be more flexible than what they are getting in the local market.
Which brings me to another point, which I think is also critically important. We mentioned earlier about export readiness, but now export readiness in the context of, for a long time, companies here have been inward looking because they've been focusing on, as you are rightly saying, clawing back the market that had been taken over by foreign products.
Yeah.
Are we ready? Are we aware of this opportunity and ready to actually go out there and say, look, we can compete in all these markets?
Yeah, what we've done as Zimtrade, currently we've got a team or some consultants that are working on a strategy for Zimtrade in terms of how we approach this AfCFTA. So they are working on that strategy, which will also guide us to say how best do we fully utilize or take up this opportunity that has been availed through the signing or the implementation of the African Free Trade Area. Yeah.
Very lastly, as we head towards wrapping up, I always like to end on a point of saying, look, what is the way forward? So we've spoken a bit about horticulture quite extensively and looked at what's happening there, the opportunities and the priorities. AfCFTA, going forward as a country, if we are to maximize and get the most potential out of our exports, what do you think are the key priorities that we need to do right away?
In terms of the priorities, I think as we have been discussing, the issue of retooling, I think it should be one of the major priorities. We need to have funding facilities that will assist our companies to be able to retool and get the latest machinery. We should also, as you mentioned, the issue of ease of doing export business. We need to also look at our internal processes and find how best can we assist our companies. The key thing these days is about benchmarking. You find that even in terms of the certificates of origin, at one time they were not sold. We didn't sell those certificates of origin as Zimtrade, but we did a benchmarking exercise in terms of what our companies, in terms of their competitors in South Africa, Zambia, Botswana, how much are they paying for those for the certificates of origin? I think locally they were paying something like $20 per triplicate. So as Zimtrade were to come in to say, okay, it seems it's becoming an additional cost to our exporters. So we came through and we were able to now start selling those certificates of origin for $1 per triplicate, and for the European market we are now selling them for $1 for 2. So those are some of the initiatives that needs to happen. And also I'm sure in terms of export incentives, companies are also talking about export incentives. We need to find a way in terms of how our companies can benefit from export incentives. There are some that have been recently announced by the Minister of Finance, so our companies also need to take advantage of those export incentives that have been announced.
Do you think they're attractive enough?
Yes, they are attractive enough, and also I'm sure there will be a lot of engagements in terms of the private sector, in terms of their effectiveness. It takes time, so there will be a need after 3 or 6 months we need to go back to the exporting community to find out the effectiveness of the recently announced or pronounced export incentives.
Indeed, and we hope also to revisit and come back to you and find out how we're doing in terms of all these opportunities that we've spoken about today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mbare.
Similo Nkala is the Operations Director for Zimtrade. He has been my guest in this latter half of the program, the Rebound series. A bit earlier, we're on a farm rather in Mwonzora, finding out how production is going there in terms of some of those export produce. My name is Farai Mwakutuya. This has been the Rebound series. Thank you so much for joining us. Join us again for another edition next time. Bye-bye.